The September 11 attacks. A day that changed the world. Chronicles Part 1. The day the world stood still. The morning of September 11, 2001, began just like any other day in New York City. The sun rose, people commuted to work, and life seemed ordinary. But in a matter of hours, the very fabric of global security and trust would be torn apart. Welcome to the first of a three-part series exploring the profound impact of that fateful day. In the day the world stood still, we'll dive deep into the chilling events of 9/11, understanding its preludes and immediate global reactions. September 11, 2001. A date that echoes through history with sorrow, anger, and disbelief. The day that the world stood still, watching in horror as terror unfurled upon American soil. To truly grasp the origins of the September 11 attacks, we must journey back to the Cold War era when Afghanistan was a battleground between the Soviet Union and the Mujahideen fighters. The Soviets invaded Afghanistan in 1979, sparking a decade-long resistance from local Mujahideen. With covert backing from the CIA and Pakistan's ISI, these fighters battled the Soviets. Among those who answered the call for jihad against the Soviets was a young, wealthy Saudi named Osama bin Laden. Initially involved in logistical support, bin Laden's commitment deepened, eventually leading to the creation of Al-Qaeda. After the Soviets withdrew in 1989, the victorious Mujahideen fighters returned to their nations. However, the victory left behind a mix of experienced jihadists without a war and a sentiment that they could defy superpowers. Bin Laden's anger wasn't just aimed at the Soviets. He saw the West, especially the US, as infidels occupying holy lands. The presence of US troops in Saudi Arabia during the Gulf War particularly incensed him. Al-Qaeda, which means the base, was formed to continue the jihad. Throughout the 1990s, they were responsible for a series of attacks against US interests, including the bombings of US embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. Bin Laden's hate speeches grew in intensity. He declared a holy war against the US, urging Muslims to attack American civilians and military. This declaration set the stage for the most devastating terrorist attack in history. September 11, 2001, dawned like any other Tuesday in New York City. The sun's first rays touched the iconic Twin Towers, standing proudly as symbols of American capitalism and progress. 4 planes took off that morning from various East Coast locations, all heading to California. They were American Airlines Flight 11, United Airlines Flight 175, American Airlines Flight 77, and United Airlines Flight 93. 19 hijackers, divided amongst these planes, had managed to pass security checks, armed with box cutters. And a determination to execute a plan that had been years in the making. At 8:14 a.m., Flight 11 was hijacked. Just 16 minutes later, it crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. A gigantic, horrifying fireball emerged, and black smoke billowed against the clear blue sky. The initial assumption for many was a tragic accident. Emergency services, unaware of the unfolding terrorist plot, rushed to the scene. However, at 9:03 a.m., any notions of an accident vanished. Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower in a direct, televised horror. It became chillingly clear. America was under attack. The terror wasn't confined to New York. At 9:37 a.m., Flight 77 crashed into the western side of the Pentagon, the heart of America's military establishment, causing a massive explosion. On Flight 93, passengers got wind of the other attacks. In a display of extraordinary bravery, they attempted to retake the plane. Their actions diverted it from its intended target, possibly the US Capitol. Instead, it crashed into a Pennsylvania field at 10:03 a.m. Back in New York, thousands were trapped in the Twin Towers. First responders heroically charged into the buildings, trying to rescue as many as they could. As the world watched, hoping. Then, in a heart-wrenching spectacle, the South Tower collapsed, releasing a mushroom cloud of dust and debris. The North Tower followed suit shortly after. The Twin Towers, once towering symbols of prosperity, now lay in ruins. The aftermath looked like a war zone. Manhattan was cloaked in a gray, dusty haze. The immediate area, termed Ground Zero, became a site of relentless search and rescue operations. Nearly 3,000 people from more than 90 countries died in the September 11 attacks. They were fathers, mothers, friends, colleagues, and children. A loss that remains deeply etched in the global consciousness. The sheer scale and audacity of the September 11 attacks sent shockwaves around the world. Global leaders, communities, and individuals expressed their horror, solidarity, and condolences. Media outlets globally ran stories on the attack, trying to grapple with its magnitude and implications. For days, the attacks were the primary focus, highlighting its global significance. Leaders from all continents expressed their sorrow and solidarity with the United States. From Nelson Mandela in South Africa to Queen Elizabeth II in the UK, the unanimous message was clear. An attack on one democracy was an attack on all. Iconic landmarks illuminated in red, white, and blue, and people across diverse cultures held candlelight vigils. It felt as though the world was grieving as one. For the first time in its history, NATO invoked Article 5, which states that an attack on one NATO member is an attack on all. It showcased the unity and collective defense commitment of the alliance. The intelligence community worldwide went into overdrive. Information sharing initiatives were heightened, as nations realized the interconnected nature of global terrorist networks. Airports across the globe increased their security protocols. Stricter checks, more advanced scanning equipment, and rigorous passenger screenings became the norm. Numerous countries pledged their support for the US-led war on terror. Coalitions were formed, aiming to root out terrorism and bring perpetrators to justice. Operations were launched in various parts of the world to dismantle terrorist cells. The spirit was clear. The world needed to unite to counter the threat of extremism. Many nations held memorials and services for the 9/11 victims. They weren't just American victims, but global citizens. People from over 90 countries perished that day. Everywhere, from Tokyo to Nairobi, from Berlin to Rio, ordinary citizens stood in unity, expressing their condemnation of the attacks and their hope for a peaceful future. The events of September 11 were not just an attack on the United States, but a strike against global peace and stability. But in its aftermath, the world showcased its capacity for unity, resilience, and shared determination to combat the forces of extremism. The unimaginable horrors of that September morning left the world grappling with shock, pain, and disbelief. As the immediate aftermath unfolded, the need for answers and justice grew more urgent. But what would this justice entail? And how would it reshape global dynamics? Stay tuned for Part 2, Aftermath and Wars Beyond Borders, as we delve into these pressing queries and more.